Please welcome Andrew Grill.
These three brands have one thing in common. They've all been completely destroyed by digital disruption. Think about that again. These brands that we knew and loved no longer exist. They join more than half of the Fortune 500 that have also disappeared because of digital disruption since 2000. So we had Blockbuster, where we go and return our tape or rewind and send the DVD back, which has now been replaced by Netflix. The Kodak moment is now the Instagram selfie. And I don't know anyone that owns a Nokia phone anymore. It's all about Apple and Samsung. So we've spoken a lot today about disruption. I've lost count at about 50 times it's been mentioned today. And it's really, really important that we keep talking about it. We even saw last Friday the world have digital disruption happen closer to home. Hundreds, if not thousands, of X-ray machines, data terminals, even parking meters and railway displays were hijacked for ransom by criminals looking to disrupt in a very negative way. And so hopefully that's all out of the way and it won't actually happen. And oh no, what am I going to do? Oh, it's okay, I'm on a Mac. It's all right. Now, of course, to look at what's happening in the future, you would have to employ a futurist. And my most popular futurist is Arthur C. Clarke. He sadly passed away a few years ago. But back in 1974, an Australian journalist asked him what life would be like in the year 2001. And this is what he had to say.
Well, with that movie 2001, you're projecting us into the 21st century. I brought along my son Jonathan, who in the year 2001 will be the same age as I am now. Maybe he will be better adjusted to this kind of world that you're trying to portray.
The big difference when he grows up, in fact, if we wanted to wait for the year 2001, is that he will have in his own house, not a computer as big as this, but at least a console through which he can talk to his friendly local computer and get all the information he needs for his everyday life, like his bank statements, his theatre reservations, all the information you need in the course of living in a complex modern society. This will be in a compact form in his own house. He'll have a television screen like these here and a keyboard, and he'll talk to the computer and get information from it, and he'll take it as much for granted as we take the telephone.
I wonder though, what sort of a life would it be like in social terms? I mean, if our whole life is built around the computer, do we become a computer-dependent society and computer-independent individuals?
In some ways, but they'll also enrich our society because it'll make it possible for us to live really anywhere we like. Any businessman, any executive could live almost anywhere on Earth and still do his business through a device like this. And this is a wonderful thing. It means we wanted to be stuck in cities, we better live out in the country or wherever we please, and still carry on complete interaction with human beings as well as with other computers.
So he got it pretty right, didn't he? Even down to the societal impacts of having a computer in the home and on your person all the time. And I think he was very right to ask that. Now, why I also love that clip is if you've seen the movie Steve Jobs, that opens the movie. That clip in its entirety opens the movie to try and introduce the fact that Arthur C. Clarke and other futurists got it pretty right. But he was looking almost 30 years ahead. But we don't have 30 years, we don't have 30 weeks, we might even have 30 days to see what's going to disrupt our industry. So what you need is a practical futurist, of which I am one, because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen near term, what you should be thinking about and doing next week, about how you should disrupt your next staff meeting, your next investment review, and actually challenge your leaders, challenge your peers with a very different way of thinking. Because disruption isn't just about technology, it's about culture change, it's about new ways of doing business. Now I'm going to throw a number out at you. 63,990. Any ideas what that has in terms of relevance to disruption? I'll give you one more clue. This is a stock price. Maybe one more clue? 63,990 is the percentage increase of Amazon since their IPO 20 years ago next Monday. Amazon.com has grown exponentially. And we often don't think of them as a typical disruptor. We think of Uber and Netflix and Airbnb, and we'll talk about those as the more contemporary disruptors. But Amazon has been disrupting in a couple of ways for nigh on 20 years. Now last week, Warren Buffett had his annual event in Omaha where they come to Warren and he gives out his sage advice. And he was interviewed on CNBC, and I was watching this yesterday. I thought this absolutely explains why Amazon has been a very, very successful disruptor. Let's see what Warren had to say about Jeff Bezos and Amazon.
With Amazon, he said, we needed the internet. Somebody else spent billions of dollars developing it, but it wouldn't have worked without the internet. He said we needed transportation. Somebody else had already built railroads and UPS and all of that sort of thing. And he said we needed payment systems. That would take billions of dollars to build, but that had already been done by Visa and all along the line. So he took three huge requirements where the other guys had spent the money, and then he combined them in a way that he didn't have to spend the money. It's brilliant. I give him great credit for it.
You have talked extensively over the last several days, even the last several months, about how Jeff Bezos is the best business leader you think we have right now in the United States, about how Amazon is a brilliant company. And now you're talking about how it's one of 5 companies that take no capital to continue to build. How come you don't buy shares of Amazon?
Stupidity. I was impressed with Jeff early. I never thought he could pull off what he did. And what's really, I thought he could pull off something, but on the scale that has happened, it's changed your behavior, it's changed everybody in the office's behavior. And the remarkable thing about Jeff, and everything else, is he's done it in 2 industries almost simultaneously that really don't have that much connection. I've never seen any person develop 2 really important industries at the same time and really be the operational guy in both. And he's done a good job with the Washington Post on the side, just on it personally. But here you take cloud services. There was a Charlie Rose show on this that he did 3 or 4 months ago. He thought he would have 2 years of runway. He got 7 years. You do not want to give Jeff Bezos a 7-year head start
before the competitors jumped in
any
on cloud
economic
services.
race. So at the same time he's shaking up the whole retail world, he's also shaking up the IT world simultaneously, and I take my hat off to him.
So people listen to Warren Buffett. They listen to what he says because he's able to dissect why business models have worked. And I think he rightly praises Jeff Bezos and the team at Amazon for what they've done. And look at the first part of that video where Bezos basically had the ingredients that were there. He needed a distribution channel, he has that. He needed a payment system, someone else developed that. And he needed a communications channel. So he wasn't creating anything new. He was bringing all these things together to delight customers. Then the second part of his genius was, while he's running his e-commerce business on all these servers in-house, he had spare capacity. So why not rent this spare capacity in Amazon Web Services to people that need it? And that born cloud companies. And companies like ours and Microsoft and Google are all playing catch up to try and beat Amazon at what they're doing. So I think that's a really, really smart strategy. Now, if I'm to talk about digital disruption, you probably want to know just a little bit about what my credentials are. The introduction was deliberately very, very brief. So I want to share with you some of my own digital credentials. Wondering if any of you know what this is? Any hands? Sinclair ZX80. You can get an extra drink at the bar afterwards. This was my first computer back in 1980. It had 1K of RAM, 4K of ROM and a squidgy keyboard, and I learned to program in BASIC in 1980. And a few months ago, my daughter Madeline, who's 10, we were at the Science Museum in London, and we walked past a glass case. And the glass case had behind it an Apple II and the Sinclair ZX80. And Madeline turned to me, she said, "Daddy, isn't that the computer you keep talking about?" "Yes, Madeline." "It's behind a glass case in a museum. You must be really old." "Yes, Madeline, I'm really old. I've been doing this for a while, and so I think I have some credibility in understanding what it's like to play with this technology. I have an engineering degree. I worked for 6 startups over the last 12 years before IBM. I know what it's like to run startups and play with technology." Anyone remember this noise? It wasn't so long ago that we were dialing up to the internet to collect our email and do our shopping and what have you. And I remember when that noise happened, you knew it was about to connect, and then finally, yes, we're logged on. I was doing that back in 1983, dialing up bulletin boards that looked a bit like this. You would ring them up, You would leave a message, we would now call it email, and my friends would leave me messages and I'd ring back later on to see if I'd got a message. Now, I knew in 1983 that I was hooked on this online thing when my father had to get an extra phone line because I was always dialed up and no one could actually get through. So I've been doing this for a while and I've got the scars to prove it. So today, in the short time I've got, I want to give you some gifts. I want to drop some pebbles on your chair, some thought pebbles that you can take back to the office, you can take back to your colleagues. I want you to think deeply about some of the things that I'm going to leave with you. But first of all, what is digital disruption? Is it good? Is it bad? It's sometimes used interchangeably with transformation because in order to be disrupted, you have to transform. So in a positive way, you'll say we're doing a digital transformation, but it means that you are being disrupted somehow by an Amazon or an Uber or a Netflix or even your own company. And I found this really great definition of what digital disruption is. Disruption occurs anytime a company uses digital tools and platforms to deliver better product experiences to customers in less time and for less money. And that, I think, is the essence of what this disruption is in a digital form. But also, I think what I need to help you do is three things. We need to define, which we've done, what is digital disruption. We need to be able to detect it and then defend it. So let's look at why disruption actually happens. And this is relevant in your industry, whether you're a fund manager or an asset manager. It's also relevant in the companies that you're looking at investing in or investing with. Because as I'll show you, it isn't always about the technology, it's about the people behind the company. There are a number of phrases that were mentioned: DevOps, IoT, AI, blockchain. If any of those phrases are foreign to you, here's my one piece of advice of many this afternoon. Just go to Wikipedia and actually find out what they mean. Because if you don't know what blockchain is, and you don't know how blockchain is and will impact your industry, then you are going to be left behind and someone else will disrupt you. I don't need you to be an expert on this. I need you to understand how it is relevant for your business. And you'll hear things about robo-brokers because they're going to replace some elements of back-end and front-end systems. You'll hear about AI and cognitive. And blockchain is going to revolutionise your industry. And jobs are going to be taken out because it's happening. And I would rather the 100 of you be at the forefront of that rather than letting one of your competitors do that. So there are three real areas as to why disruption happens. First of all, there are high profits. As you know, in your industry, lots of money can be made. You can translate that into the taxi industry. In London, there's a barrier to entry where you have to spend 3 to 4 years learning what's called the knowledge. You literally have to remember every route through London and you're tested. And there was a documentary recently, and these poor people that have to do the test, they're asked to go from A to B and they literally have to say turn left, turn right. It takes 3 years of driving around London on a moped to learn this. But an Uber taxi driver has the app. So this high barrier to entry is no longer there. In my country, where I come from, Australia, a taxi plate can cost $100,000 or $200,000. High barrier to entry. Along comes a guy with an app and that all goes away. So where there are already high profits, other people are going to say, we'll have some of that too, and they will want to disrupt you. Secondly, there are new technologies. We heard a lot about them earlier, what Linedata are doing, what other companies are doing. The technology is in here, and these new technologies will help provide better, faster services. And finally, new clients and consumers are demanding this. They want to have instant access. They don't want to have paper-based forms. They want to have the level of sophistication they have when they go home and when they can transact and communicate using social networks, online shopping, those sorts of things. When they come to work and there are barriers, they will find another way. Now, this whole notion of disruption is not new. Clay Christensen, back in HBR in 1995, looked at this, and he also wrote a great book called The Investor's Dilemma. And he's basically saying managers must be aware of ignoring these new technologies that don't initially meet the needs of their mainstream customers. Incumbents have a blind spot towards disruption. And if I had $1 or £1 or €1 every time someone said, oh, that won't work here, I wouldn't be standing here, I'd be on a beach somewhere. I have been an early adopter since my ZX80, since my dial-up modem in 1983, and in 1994 I had, from my friends, the first person who had a mobile phone. It cost me $1,000. It didn't even have Snake on it. It was a basic analog phone. And I, being the early adopter, worked out why it was that by having this thing on me all the time would increase my quality of life and my job prospects. And eventually, my friends started to see how I was getting more opportunities and I was easy to contact, and they started getting them. And now, everyone has one. I went to an event at the Science Museum a few weeks ago where they looked at the evolution of the UK mobile network. And the initial forecast for the number of subscribers were in the low millions, maybe even hundreds of thousands. They didn't think many people would want one of these things. But now we all have one, and that whole sector is being disrupted over and over again. Consumers are ready for this. As I said before, at home, you're able to do this stuff and you want to actually do this when you're in your working life. People are researching using digital. I know that a number of you looked up my personal website before today because I saw the hits. So I saw that a few of you were doing your homework, a few LinkedIn requests, a few LinkedIn looks. I can tell from analytics whether I'm having an impact, and a few of you may even be tweeting now, and I expect some of you will look me up tonight, tomorrow, and maybe invite me on LinkedIn. I'll know whether I've done a great job. I'll do my research, my reverse research. The one thing I love about LinkedIn is who's viewed your profile. It's reverse stalking on steroids, and I love it. To go through and try and reverse engineer, why was Sally looking? Oh, that's right. Yeah. She wants to see if I'm any good or not. People transact via digital. I'm labouring the point, but we're used to doing this, and so why can't we do this with the tools and techniques that we use in ordinary life, at work? And conditions favour innovation. Kickstarter is a crowdsourced platform, one of a number, where with minimal investment, in fact other people's money, you can get a crazy idea off the ground very, very quickly. And as startups will want to do, they will fail fast, lose only $50,000 and start again. Rather than going to the bank, going in a seed round, an A round, it can now be done very, very quickly. And companies that have a culture of failing fast and fostering innovation will thrive in this new economy. And the technology finally works. Now, generally, you can get on your phone and do what you need to do relatively straightforward. 4G networks are here, smartphones are becoming more intelligent, and you can actually do all the things you want to do. The thought that 20 years ago I could stand here in Hong Kong and get my bank balance on my mobile phone securely and in real time would have been very foreign. And I remember about 20 years ago, clients would say to me, do we need to be on this internet thing? We kind of know how the story ends. So when someone says, should we worry about disruption, I remind them about the whole internet thing, and when they got their first mobile phone, they go, okay, Andrew, I get it. But whole industries are being disrupted. This is the scary bit of my presentation. Deloitte in Australia looked at the industries that are most likely to be disrupted, and they called the report short fuse, big bang, i.e. you light the touch paper and very quickly there will be a massive amount of disruption in a number of industries. And they put it in a quadrant. And the scary quadrant is top left, where we've got retail, trade, ICT and media, finance, professional services and real estate. Most people in this room are represented by those industries. But here's the scary bit. This report was from 2014. It has already happened. And so when clients say, should we worry about it, I refer them back to things that happened 3 or 4 years ago, and they agree with me that they probably should look at this. And disruption is everywhere. Everywhere I look. Who here uses WhatsApp? Lots of people. Anyone want to gather how many WhatsApps are sent per day globally? Shout out a number. 1 billion. Try 64 billion. Let's contrast that with the competition, dear old SMS. How many SMSs globally on every single network do you think are sent in a day? 20 billion. So one network, one app, one platform, one company does more than 3 times every single mobile phone operator in the world. That is disruption on a massive, massive scale. And it's just the beginning. So let's have a bit of a quiz. World's largest taxi company owns no vehicles. The answer, of course, is Uber. And this example is used so often I sometimes dare to mention it, but I want to show you the flip side of Uber. Uber didn't start as a taxi sharing service. Travis and his co-founder back in Paris were at an event called Le Web some years ago. And they're on the sidewalk and they said, gee, it'd be nice if we could get an app that could get us a limo right away. And they worked out after a while that the business model may be flawed because not everyone wants to hire limos. So let's expand that maybe to taxis and to food and groceries and those sorts of things. And now what's happening is whole governments are trying to disrupt Uber because they have cut into the areas where there are high profits. And in London, there was a huge demonstration. Black cab drivers stopped their taxis and blockaded London. That was the biggest single day of Uber sign-ups. It played directly into their hands. People go, what's this Uber thing? I've never heard of it. Oh, it's really cool. We should use it. And now if you're in London, every black cab has to accept credit card. Now I remember, I've been in London 11 years now, I remember hagging a taxi, you take credit card? No, mate. Or if they do, there's a bag over it saying, it's broken. The competitive advantage was not that Uber was faster or quicker, they took the payment method that I preferred. And so now the government has actually had to regulate to have all the London cabbies accept credit card payments. Sounds pretty simple. Second question, world's largest accommodation provider owns no real estate. That of course is? Airbnb. Airbnb. Know how they got their name? AirBnB. They started life as a company that would rent out homes that had an air mattress. They worked out though that the addressable market of homes in the US that had a blow-up mattress was fairly small. And so they had to pivot and rethink how they might actually work around this. And now as we know, you can get an Airbnb almost anywhere. It's also eating into cities. In London, where I'm from, government is thinking about regulating because short-term rentals are disappearing from the market. If I'm a landlord, do I want a 30-day tenant or 6 short tenants paying a premium? I'm going to do that. So short-term rentals come off the market. The flip side is that Qantas in Australia last year decided that if you wanted to book a holiday or an airfare on Qantas and then wanted to book an Airbnb, you could do it through the website. When they announced that, the hotel industry was up in arms. How dare you? We rely on referrals. Qantas merely said, if our customers want access to this, who are we to stop them? You guys have to compete. You've got high barrier to entry, and this other company has worked out how the network effect can work. Last quiz. World's largest media producer owns no movie theatres. It is, of course, Netflix. We talked about them before. Here's an interesting fact. You all know there used to be a DVD mailer company. Well, of course, when technology increased and you could start streaming services, they then started delivering all online. And when Kevin Spacey went to them with the proposition to make House of Cards costing reputedly $100 million a season, they said yes. They said yes because they had the analytics. They knew who watched Kevin Spacey movies or the director or the genre, where they were, what their friends watched. They knew they were on a safe bet. They had to clear 565,000 subscribers to break even. They signed up 17 million. Wow, that's a business model that works. Now, disruption has become front page news even here in Asia. Last year, I saw someone tweet this from the Singapore Times. Prime Minister Lee, the Singaporean Prime Minister, has an annual day address almost this time every year. And he spent about 12 minutes of his hour-long address actually talking about disruption. I've got the 2-minute highlight reel. Let's have a look at what Prime Minister Lee said.
The defining challenge which we face in this era is disruption. Things are changing fast, old models are not working, new models are coming thick and fast, and we are having to adjust and to keep up. Because of technology, globalization. And the disruption will happen over and over again, relentlessly. I just use the familiar example of the taxi business. What do we do in Singapore? We can respond to disruptive change like this in 2 ways. We can close ourselves off, try to stop people from using the new technology. You must do things the way you have always done it. So Uber out, Grab out, any new services coming along? No. We impose restrictions, we protect the old ways, the taxi companies, and we force everybody to stick to that. But we'll be left behind and our commuters will lose out and our economy will suffer. The other way is to embrace change. Let the disruption happen. You can't stop it, but you can adjust it. You can adjust to it. Let the commuters enjoy better service, but help the incumbents and especially help the taxi drivers to adapt to the changes.
That's really important. He understands that it's happening. They have to adapt. They're not going to stop it because it means better quality service for consumers. So this disruption, is it new? No, it's not. It's been around for a while. If we cast our mind back to the Industrial Revolution, this is where steam power allowed machines to work much faster than humans could. And so a whole notion of work was replaced by machines. We had the digital revolution where computers like the IBM 360 were used to increase processing power. Yes, jobs were displaced, but people then had to learn how to program these things. And so that was another revolution. The one I've lived through is the internet revolution, where back in 1983, I dialed up this internet. I remember the first time I went on the real internet was actually 1994. I was in Adelaide at my university. We had connectivity around the world, and I saw a webcam of a canal in the Netherlands. Oh, this is insane. I'm sitting at my computer in Adelaide, Australia, watching something happening live around the other side of the world. Wow, maybe I can make a career out of this. You just never know. And finally, the network revolution that we are all living through today. This is where the social networks, the ability to communicate and build that network effect is why the Ubers, the Netflix, the B&Bs are as successful as they are. There's a great book that actually analyses this whole network effect by these three authors, and it really looks at why these networks that have no inventory and no assets really are able to thrive and live in this new economy. So if I'm the practical futurist, about now you're saying, okay, Andrew, I believe you. We are in a predicament where we need to understand how to prepare, how to defend this disruption. What can I do? Well, you need to become a digital business. You don't need to just say that you've got a website. You actually need to live and breathe this. So like I said, if some of those terminologies I mentioned don't make a lot of sense, you should go and research them. And in fact, companies that you invest time and money in, if they don't know what they mean, that should increase your risk profile. We heard a lot about how you manage and measure risk. For me, if I look at a board that's been there 15 years, but doesn't have anyone on the board that is actually literate in this sort of stuff, that for me would ring alarm bells. But you have to disrupt yourself. Netflix, AirBnB and Uber all disrupted themselves and continue to, because there are other faster, nimbler competitors. Those three companies are now of a size where they are going to run into the problems that large companies face. So how do you disrupt yourself without ruining your business model? Well, why not set aside a digital budget? Set aside some money, which means you have to stop doing something, to actually ring-fence some money and resources to do something and investigate how you might take your existing products and services and make them digital. But also look at a bit further on. What are things that we could actually take onto an online footing? You need to build a truly digital board, not one like this, one that actually understands what's happening with digital. And I'll talk about it in a moment. I call it digital literacy. And last year, IBM and one of the business groups in London looked at this notion, asked CEOs what was challenging them, and they said that businesses should diversify the advice they're getting at board level and look to new avenues to inject digital skills at the strategic level from non-execs, future leaders in different industries. So like I've said, my risk profile, as I look at a board, what's their tenure, how long have they been there, not just the gender diversity, which is important, but this thing called digital diversity. And I believe you need not one, but two people on the board that absolutely get digital. They could sit on the board of their own nature because they understand compliance and P&L, and they could sit on the board anyway. But they see the world through a digital lens. Why two? One person, they become the digital guy or gal, and it's like, oh, Andrew's just the digital guy, he's just a bit noisy. No, you need two so they back each other up. And the other thing I look at is, when you mention digital, does the board lean forward and become curious? Or do they step back and say, no, that's not for us? The number of companies I see go and do a study trip, they take the whole board to the west coast of America, they go and see Facebook, LinkedIn, Apple and Twitter. And they come back, yes, we're a digital board. And then next month they just fall back into the status quo. A digitally literate board would challenge that status quo every time the board meets. You can do things closer to home. Why not set up small innovation teams? Actually look at this notion and pull apart your current offerings and how can we make it more digitally friendly. You need to have a collaboration culture. In organisations gone by, your power and your position was what you knew, not what you shared. And now your power in an organisation is what you're able to share with not just other colleagues, but also partners and the industry. You definitely need senior management support. They need to be behind this and backing you 100%. And you hear a lot about DevOps, and I think we even mentioned the word Agile today. Now, Agile methodology in software is not doing it and then waiting for something to happen and then 6 months goes by. Agile development is what they call 2-week sprints. They do a piece of the programming or the project, they then review it. They do what Queen Victoria did. Every Thursday they stand up at a 15-minute meeting. Why standing up? Because people actually deliver things a lot faster when they have to stand up and there are no chairs. And then they go back to what they're doing. And the funny thing was that I was talking in a business school a couple of years ago about this, and these are all executive MBAs, they're all experienced professionals. They said, this is crazy, Andrew. You mean every 2 weeks you could fail? Yes. But the alternative is you take 6 or 9 months and the whole project is written off because you had no idea that A and B didn't talk together. Now, I can say this because I've worked and lived in 6 startups, but you need to start thinking like a startup. Why have Amazon, Uber, Airbnb all been successful? They've been able to run really quickly. Facebook pushes out code twice a day. So if you're in New Zealand, you actually see the new Facebook when you wake up in the morning. And they're able to do that because their whole methodology is get it out there. And maybe it's broken, but by the time it gets to Hong Kong, we'll know. Enough users would have complained and we can fix it by the time the sun gets to London. Now, what I'm seeing in London especially is financial institutions like banks taking a huge risk. I was invited the other week to a Barclays initiative called RISE. And they've got an initiative, there are actually 6 or 7 centres around the world, not one here yet, but who knows, where they've actually taken a whole building. They've fitted it out like a WeWork. I went there for the opening. I could have been in a WeWork, a serviced office. But they want the fintech startups to play in their sandpit, in their office. And they get the first look because Barclays is a 300-year-old bank. And they know they can't do it all alone. But if you've got tenants that are literally shoulder to shoulder with seasoned employees, you're likely to get the first view of what's going on. So I challenge all of you. If you think you are going to be disrupted by fintech startups that can operate very, very quickly, why not invite them into the playpen and have them closer to home? And it's what it looks like. It's a fantastic environment. They charge very low rent, and again, they get the first look at this technology. Now, often what happens is regulators get in the way, but there's a couple of examples where I think regulators have done the right thing. In the UK, the regulators were they got some great consultants who said, you need to open up the banking system in the UK. The retail banking system is broken. There are big banks, same problem in Australia, and they need to share what they're doing through APIs and more open systems. So the government has regulated by 2018, they have to adopt an open banking standard. So APIs are available, and fintech startups can program crazy stuff to make use of the data. Now, you're all going to say regulatory, it's being handled because it's the government behind this. Now, I won't mention which bank it was, but I actually had the opportunity to ask a senior executive at a UK bank what they thought about this initiative. And would they have done it themselves if the government had mandated it? And they said, no, we wouldn't. And I went, wrong answer. That is totally the wrong answer. And this is why some of the industries are looking backwards, not forwards. A startup mentality would have said, let's actually lobby the government to open the APIs, to give consumers more choice and have them stick around. So you need to think like a consumer. Just as we go home and play with all these services and we like and we hate things, you need to put the consumer hat on. Would a consumer actually want to use our products and services? I actually use competitor services. I want to see what it's like for other people to use technology that is competing against my own. The question I've always asked is, why does it take so long to do foreign currency transfers? I live in London, some of my family lives in Australia, so every month I'm sending some of my salary back. And my current bank, who may or may not be headquartered close to here, was charging me literally hundreds of pounds a month to transfer my salary. So I went to a startup called TransferWise, and they charged me £50. Interesting bit of scuttlebutt, this is public so I can mention it. Santander, the Spanish bank, had some documents leaked. And they basically were saying that if they had to cut their exchange fees to the TransferWise level, they would lose nearly £900 million of revenue. Wow, that's disruption. And TransferWise said, thank you so much for mentioning us. It sort of ratifies our business model, and I'm glad that we're talking about it. But I always wonder why it took so long to transfer the money. And what National Australia Bank did last year was they sent $10 around the world in 10 minutes using blockchain. So if they can do it, then why can't all the other banks do this very, very quickly? Now, we're drawing to a close. We have to mention the M word, which of course is millennials, because everyone has to have a presentation that involves millennials because they are the future. I see a number of you represented here today, and they are also the employees of the future. And just as you get frustrated when you can't use your tools and techniques at the office, millennials will not join your company if they can do all this stuff on their phone and they work for you and it's all locked down or they're not able to collaborate. They will go around you. If I had $1 for every WhatsApp group out there or Facebook group that is work-related because they can't use the internal tools at an employer, they will get ways around it. And I actually came across this interesting service called Trove. It's basically dynamic insurance, and it appeals to the millennial generation. Let's have a 60-second look at what Trove does.
I'm leaving my house now. And as I step outside, all of these things with me are fully insured against loss or damage, instantly. That trick I just showed you, that's Trove. Trove is smart insurance. Unlike blanket policies that cover everything at once, Trove helps me protect just the things I care about. So if I want to protect my skis for the weekend, I can do that. Can I? Yeah. And if I want to protect my bike for the afternoon, I can do that too. All I have to do is swipe to protect. My Trove is an on-demand inventory of everything I own, and adding to it is super easy. Found it. Trove provides protection against damage, loss, and theft. So if anything happens, just about anything you can imagine, I know my camera's covered. Trove makes it easy to file a claim and get paid right away. I just answer these questions, and Trove handles the rest. Now this doesn't feel quite so bad. And every time I leave my house, things like my laptop and phone are protected.
Come on, this time.
Nice work. Trove puts me in control of the things I care about, and that's really smart.
Okay, so a consumer example, what are they doing? They're factoring risk. So if they can do it for a consumer asset that is being used for a short period of time, why can't you guys do it? And consumers will want to have things that are as simple as that. As we mentioned before, you've now got retail investors having access to all this big data, and so I would expect that fintech startups will start doing all these sort of things with professionally sourced data. Who here knows about IFTTT? IFTTT, ring a bell? A few people. Stands for if this, then that. Now, as a geeky aside, if you want to automate your life, you can basically connect IFFT to your Twitter account to then send an email, or if you upload a picture to Instagram, you could do that, or you can remind yourself to take the rubbish out if it's a Wednesday. You can basically produce what they call recipes to trigger this and then do that. And so you might then think, well, why can't we use this again in the finance world? So if my account is less than 2,000, then do this. So again, have a look at these consumer-grade apps and platforms and see how that might work in your world. And I reckon if I come back next year, some of this would already have happened because there is going to be a fintech out there that is working on this right now in your industry. So, back to being a practical futurist. What are you going to do next week? It's going to be a very disruptive week because you are going to put your hand up so many times in the next staff meeting they're going to be annoyed with you. They're going to say, who is this Andrew guy? We want to go and put masking tape around his mouth. Why did he give you all these pebbles to put on the table? He's just disrupting. Yes, I am. I want to give you permission to disrupt what you're doing because if you don't, someone else will. Now, I was asked to also talk about big data. So there's a bit of a segue here, but I want to finish off on where big data actually comes into all this and what it matters to you. So big data, we had a discussion before about the sources of data. I come from a startup world where we looked at Twitter data. We had at one time the full Twitter fire hose. We were receiving every single tweet in real time since 2008. We had 250 billion tweets. And we could search through it in real time. When we showed it to Twitter, they were like, we can't even do this. They can now, but that was the sort of level of sophistication we had. So I flew here on a British Airways BA 380, and every flight, they generate about a terabyte of data. Engine information, avionics, all that sort of stuff has to go somewhere. And so part of the challenge is, in your industry, in these industries, there is just so much data. You have to be able to source it, you have to ingest it and make sense of it. And back to what Jeff Bezos did with cloud computing, 4 or 5 years ago that wasn't possible. Now you can just dump things into the cloud. And if you need more data, you need to size something up, it can be done dynamically. Who here knows about the Internet of Things, IoT? Few people. This is where things are going to be connected, from fridges to who knows what. Anyone here got a fitness device like a Fitbit? Yeah, that's an IoT device. This is telemetry on my body. It's got heart rate, it's got movement, it's got when I sleep. Now, I would like my doctor to actually have access to that. He doesn't have access yet. And there's a company called Under Armour, and they, through acquisitions, have about 260 million people that have one of their devices. So every single day, they are getting telemetry from 260 million human beings that are fit, that are unfit, that are happy, unhappy. Imagine what you can do once you've got that sort of big data. And the challenge just gets bigger and bigger. When everything is connected together, you're going to have an explosion of data. And what we saw with the ransomware last Friday, that is going to impact, because everything becomes a device that can be hacked. So that is going to impact your industry as well. And the final example of big data is, of course, weather. Weather impacts everything that we do. I guarantee you all check the weather at least once a day, because it informs you of a decision. What am I going to wear? Which route am I going to take to work? Those sorts of things. And in a business context, it can actually involve factoring risk. Airlines want to know how to reduce the impacts of turbulence. And last year, IBM bought the Weather Company. It's probably the world's biggest IoT platform, because there are 200,000 weather stations around the world that are feeding in real-time weather data from around the world. We haven't got time now to talk about Watson, which is cognitive computing, but you add weather plus Watson plus a machine who knows about weather and can forecast, and that becomes really, really powerful. It might plug in through an API to one of your risk models. And one of the examples I've got of big data is when you visualize it. And the Mayor of Boston had a crazy idea. He thought, we have all this data about what's happening in the city, which street lights are out, where the traffic is flowing, how many plows we have out. Why don't we actually visualize this? And so my tip here is, if you have an explosion of data, learn how to visualize it in a human readable form. I've developed dashboards like these for bank executives, because all they want to know is red or green. Just as in my car, I don't know how an engine works, but I know if the oil light is on, that's bad. And if the speed is under 100, that's good. I don't need to know how it all works. And so I had one executive who actually said, I'm very risk averse. I want a dashboard that's completely blank unless there's a problem, because he works in PR. So we built him a dashboard that predominantly was black, and then if you looked up and there was something on there, it's like, okay, I have a crisis. So this data is impossible to tame as humans. So what you have to do is visualize it, not just in a geeky form, but imagine this outside your chief executive's office. He or she could see how you're doing without having reports every week about how you're doing. Look at your dashboard. And we did this with good effect in social media. So, are you ready to disrupt? Who here is ready to disrupt? Show of hands. If every hand doesn't go up, I have not done my job. You need to think about disrupting. But in order to get digital, you need to be digital. Now, I've been playing with this stuff for years because I'm a geek and I did an engineering degree. But I'm also curious. So I got a Fitbit, not because I'm into fitness, but I wanted to understand how we could augment a human being. And now that I've got a heart rate monitor and a motion sensor, it actually shows me how I'm sleeping or not at night. That's kind of cool. But I encourage you to try this stuff. Who here has ever created a website? Not enough. I go into boardrooms and I say, your homework is you're going to do these 3 things. One of them is to create a very basic website. And when they go and do it, they go, that was pretty easy. Wow, I understand how we actually do that, and I got my name on the screen, and they then could feel this digital environment because they were actually doing it rather than talking about it. Nicholas Negroponte is a great professor. He was in charge of the MIT lab and was behind the One Laptop for Child initiative. And in 2000 in Sydney, I had the pleasure of seeing him on stage. And the one thing he said has kept in my mind. He said that back then we were all talking about e-business. But in a few years we won't call it e-business, we'll just call it business. So let's drop the digital moniker or the social moniker. It is data. It is media. By putting the word digital before it, sometimes allows people to charge more money or create an air of exclusivity. But if you can actually get your fingers on the technology and start playing with it and understanding what it means, then you will be ahead. Let me leave you with a final pebble. People. How do you staff up your organisation with the right people? Not just full of millennials who know how to do this stuff, But I think you've got two tribes. And last year, Korn Ferry, a big recruitment company, looked at the sort of people you're going to need in your organisations. And they said there are two types. The first type is going digital, which is probably most of us here, including myself. These are people that know how to navigate an organisation, they can get things done, they can influence at the highest levels. But they're not as comfortable digital as the born digital, that have lived and breathed it, that don't know a time without the internet and are on their phone all the time. So you've got these two tribes, and they need each other. The going digital need the born digital to help them navigate this world, and vice versa. And so when you're hiring talent, make sure you've got a good mix of going digital and born digital, and allow them to integrate with each other. Because I want you to disrupt, or you'll be disrupted. Thank you very much.